We're now back in session, post-lunch session. Boyce. I recognize Senator Boyce, the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President, as I rise to join my colleagues on this discussion with regard to the legislation before us this afternoon. Mr. President, I plan to be quite concise with three areas of my contribution. The first shall deal with the perspective regarding the activities or steps taken by the government to date. The second shall attempt to give some consideration to those activities with regard to the external debt scenario. And the third would, as usual, venture a dream or venture a proposal with regard to how opportunity may be found from the current scenario, not necessarily focusing too much on the impasse, but perhaps identifying a way that, at least from the local debt restructuring arena, some stimulation may be found with regard to economic activity, sir. So as a starting point, let me say that kudos should be extended to the government for the steps taken to temper the impact of the local debt restructuring on the pensioners. This is something that we have spoken about in this House, sir, and it was something which was whispered before an official statement was made. And I think it's pleasing to see that the government has kept those promises that it said it would do within these chambers. And certainly, they should be commended for any activity which help those who are the most vulnerable in the scenario. So I think we need to put on record that they said they were going to offer some ease to the hardship in respect to the pensioners, and they have done so. Now, an aside says that if you place the hardship, removing it, but I don't think that that is quite fair in these circumstances. The second area, sir, relates to the external debt and the negotiations that are currently ongoing. Understandably, the Prime Minister has indicated that we don't conduct our negotiations in public, but more and more in 2019, invariably, that's the reality. Mr. President, you would know as a practicing attorney that we are taught not to comment on cases in the press. However, that doesn't seem to, indeed, sir, it doesn't seem to hold the same sway as it used to. So what we find is that we're seeing a certain amount of rhetoric by persons who have an interest in that rhetoric being seen and commented upon, maybe even to encourage some form of pressure upon the government or some attempt to force public opinion. Recognizing, however, that public opinion is so intangible, well, certainly from where I sit, sir, and should be approached with as much caution as when you approach a young fawn. But public perception and public opinion is what it is, sir. The long and short of it is that my concern relates to how far either side goes towards entrenching themselves in the scenario. Recognizing that we need the investors in the long term, but they also need us in that we provide the source of revenue which they seek. And also, it will be unfair to come with the benefit of hindsight and say the government should have done this or the government should have done that. And certainly, I don't know if this government takes that position with regard to the benefit of hindsight of what previous governments have done or have not done. But from a fairness scenario, sir, Mr. President, I think that we need to ensure that if at all possible, at the appropriate time, the relevant olive branch is extended from whichever side, and that the lines of communication are kept open so we don't find ourselves entrenched in a scenario where no one wins. So I would encourage, and I know that these things are difficult, but if at all there is an opportunity for any persons on both sides of this divide, that is the external debt situation, of course, to find the opportunity to somehow chart a way out, that certainly that should be encouraged, Mr. President. Finally, sir, I would like to speak to what I see as an opportunity with regard to the local debt restructuring market and what has presented itself coming out of the local debt restructuring activity, sir. Sir, firstly, we recognize that the impact of the local debt recovery activity is still being felt. However, the government continues to show that if there is enough vocalization of certain issues, attempts will be made to resolve them. What I have also seen, though, is I believe that there is an opportunity, sir, to do what Senator Drake speaks so often about in terms of encouraging growth, instead of just focusing on the negative aspect or the taxation gain. And that growth, sir, without having any form of expertise as to how it would actually be implemented, I suggest, sir, can come from a secondary market in relation to these debt instruments which we now find ourselves holding. In other words, Mr. President, let's say you had $100,000 in a government paper, and you're now told that your government paper, you will get it back an X amount, however, you'll get it back over a period of 10 years. And young, sprightly Senator Sanser approaches you and says, well, Mr. President, I would take that $100,000 in paper you have for a sum to be negotiated between the two of you, sir. And that sum would represent the value of you getting the money up front, and would also represent some impact or recognition of the risk Senator Sands will be taking and the time it will take to realize the money within that paper. And so, sir, it's hopeful that if this market could be encouraged and persons encouraged to take up the paper which is currently being held, we might find that there's opportunity which presents itself to create a avenue for circulation of the $9 to $10 billion that we have sitting down, resting comfortably in the banking coffers and credit union, of course. And anything such as this, sir, depends on the support of the government. Unfortunately, it has previously been stated by many a statesman that the private sector is required to take certain initiatives, and government can't be the sole provider for avenues outwards. But certainly I think that this is something which the government, if prepared to provide the necessary augmented legislative framework, and ease of doing business guidelines, and as well as some form of encouragement, sir, I believe would go a long way to encourage investor confidence, because not only would it allow persons to acquire assets to utilize in the future, sir, but the more people who take up this paper and realize that there is value to it may lend some credence to the government efforts in seeking to build back confidence with these instruments, sir. And those are my 3 contributions, and I thank you for your time, Mr. President.
Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm also not going to speak extensively, but I think there are a few points I wanted to make on the external portion of our debt in particular, to follow on from what Senator Driggs was saying. I'll just pick up one phrase that, or one piece of news that Senator McConney touched on, was this idea that we can build in a natural disaster clause into our bonds going forward. And the first thing that came to my mind is what we cannot do is build in an unnatural disaster clause to account for what happened in the last 10 years. And I put it that way because had we continued, there is no doubt in my mind that the things that you tiptoed around, Senator Drake said, devaluation and so on, would have come to pass. And I do not want to misrepresent what you said, but you spoke specifically about monetary policy and research. And the reasons I infer that you bring that to the table is because, and I'm going to make one correction to what you said there, what I called a training rod for plants, not a corrective rod and corporal punishment, may not have been doing its job, if I infer from what you're saying correctly. So without wanting to input motives or anything, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Well, I don't know. You know, I've seen that. I've seen the press is very good at clickbaiting the titles, and you'll know all about that, Senator Franklin. What I think when we talk about this debate on settling this external debt, what we're really talking about here, first, we're talking about issues of sovereignty. You know, there was a time when, before Argentina defaulted in 2001, when there was absolutely no way an investor would think he could sue a sovereign nation because the sovereign nation took it upon itself to restructure its own debt, sometimes for very good reasons. But since then, and it took 15 years in the case of Argentina, since then a precedent has been set where investors now feel they can challenge the sovereignty of nations like Barbados or Argentina or Congo, Venezuela, what have you. We've seen this before, particularly when it comes to things like blacklists and gray lists and international tax regulations where the goalposts are shifted. And this is another variation of that theme. What we really have is a negotiation, both sides seeking the best deal. Now, we can sit here and we can talk about consequences and so on. I will touch on that a little bit. But the best deal for an international investor revolves around his narrow financial calculations. The best deal for a democratically elected government has a much broader mandate. And you're talking about trade-offs between do we settle now and pay these international investors what they want, which is to say, give them a deal that would be inequitable to those people who have already settled with us, and that represents 80% of the outstanding debt has been settled. Or do we fight on and have more money to put into, for example, the 2 bills we're going to talk to later today, the Barbados Water Authority and the Utilities Act. We put more money into our own infrastructure, into our own people, into our own development. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about getting the very best deal possible, and it's a zero-sum game. You know, we cannot be in a rush to settle with these 80-odd creditors. It may be, I think 50% of them are actually the talkative ones, but there were around 80. We have to fight for the best deal out there. Now, Barbados is not, there are good reasons for that we should be doing this. Barbados is not a serial defaulter. I mentioned Argentina a moment ago. Well, you can say we're starting now, but I will tell you, if you know statistics, one data point isn't even close to a trend. And this is why I talked about unnatural disasters earlier. Barbados is not a serial defaulter. Whatever you say, Senator Franklin, it's not getting there. Yeah. Barbados has a tradition of serious administration when it comes to government. And Barbados, as an aside, because I want to touch on something Senator Boyce said, has about $10 billion in domestic savings that it can seek to tap in mitigation of what's going on with these foreign investors. And when I talk about the best deal, investors now feel, what's the word? They now feel empowered because of what happened with Argentina to infer or to produce a veiled threat relating to legal action, and we can invoke the ghost of Argentina and all of this sort of thing. But when you look at some of the negotiations and legal action that have taken place, those countries do not represent the same profile as Barbados. You look at somewhere like Greece that got itself into a mess, that the international investors deliberately held out on and forced a completely different resolution on the government of Greece. The government of Greece sacrificed 2 percentage points of GDP to satisfy overseas holders of their foreign debt, principally the Germans. Now we're in a situation, I talk about our infrastructure and the bills we're going to debate later. We're in a situation where we're not Greece, we didn't waste money. We had an unnatural disaster and we're looking to fix it. Now that money that we do not want to break this deal for can be spent on roads, it can be spent on water, it can be spent on schools, it can be spent on Queen Elizabeth Hospital blood testing kits, which I think is a topical concern for Senator Maynard. Or we can roll over. You know? This is really about power. This is not about fairness. You know? When you look at some of the nations who've been forced to bow, whether it's Venezuela, who, as Senator Drake said, you know, they represent an example. I don't think she cited Venezuela directly, but she cited someone else. But the very last people that they touched were the foreign investors. And that was in September 2016, the Venezuelans. You know, everybody else they dealt with up front, but they were so fearful of what the foreign investor would do, they held them off till the very end. It is only in a case like Puerto Rico, which is a non-sovereign nation, that got protection by an act of Congress, the 2016 PROMESA Act, and was thereby shielded from creditors. It's only in that kind of case where you can wield that kind of power that you don't have to worry about anything. Otherwise, it's incumbent on us to fight for the best deal possible and not be overly concerned with vague threats of what might happen. It may happen, it may not happen. This is, so far, still an equally balanced negotiation. So long as they hold out, they're not paid, and so long as we don't reach an agreement with them, we may have an impact on access to international finance. But we have to weigh these things fairly equally and not overweight things that we're not sure are actually going to happen. Now, there are a couple of things in our favor. I'm not privy to the negotiations, but there's some things that really do distinguish us. I said we're not a serial defaulter, as much as Senator Franklin appears to want that to be the case. He appears to want this to be the start of a trend, but it is not the start of a trend. You know, we have a great record. We have provided, not yet is true, not yet and doubtful there ever will be a yet. When we look at our debt profile and the returns we have given to all investors on a risk-adjusted basis, and this is how financial people look at it, the reward has been in excess of the risk people have paid money for. Now, this is not just me saying it. I also read that study that you cited, and there's another one also. It's a piece of research that came out in February, I think, by 3 academics, Meyer, Reinhardt, and Trebesh, and it's called Sovereign Bonds Since Waterloo. And basically, the bottom line conclusion for them is that it is in fact countries that default frequently that offer the best returns over the long term. But what investors have to cope with is the volatility that comes with. Now, Barbados has not offered that volatility because of our profile, and yet we still manage to give excess returns over time. When we're back on our feet, we'll do the same thing again. And I think investors have to realize that also. They're dealing with a serious nation who have paid its debt and had to cope with an unnatural disaster that drove this exceptional non-trend data point. I want to say a couple of points in response to Senator Drake's and a little bit to Senator Boyce. Yeah, that 1 in 2 litigation outcome, you know, this may seem a small point, but to me that is a descriptive statistics, not a descriptive statistic rather than a probability. You know, I wouldn't say in any given context in these negotiations there's a 1 in 2 chance to take us to court. But I put that to one side. Yes, there are potentially consequences, but going to court doesn't mean we lose, by the way. You know, going to court means, are we, on the balance of the available facts, going to be able to prove that we offered an equitable settlement to everybody? I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to go further than that, and it would be in the hands of the judges and the lawyers around the table to comment on that. It's in the interest of both sides, as Senator Boyce said, to reach a compromise solution. They want to be paid. We want to be able to fix the water, as we'll discuss later on today, and roads and all the rest of it. Senator Drake's mentioned that there are alternatives, alternative ways, and this is not to pick on Senator Drake's. I think you're absolutely right. There are alternative ways of doing this. You mentioned Seychelles, Belize, Jamaica. I mentioned Venezuela a moment ago. But I think the key point, when we offer up these, or this old saw that there are many ways to skin a cat, is that what we tried to do was present a solution that was not discriminatory to any investor. What's been done in other cases, particularly Venezuela, for example, is they offered very favorable terms to international holders of our dollar-denominated debt. So my message is that one size does not fit all. These kind of negotiations, it's very difficult for me to accept an argument that, oh, well, they did it differently in Seychelles or somewhere else. Maybe we should have done it differently. I think they match their circumstances. We have to match our circumstances. And I'll tell you, as you went on in your discourse and you spoke about Michael Manley and that quote, a lovely quote, but what struck me out of that quote, and that was about tourism, but I apply that to this debt situation also. You know, to my mind, the rules are there to serve us, not vice versa. You know, and if we get in a situation driven by unnatural disaster where we have to change the rules in order to do what is best for our citizens, we should be free to do that. And we have to take the consequences, and we have to negotiate with the foreign holders of our dollar-denominated debt. Now, come on to the part that, you know, I'm very wary. I don't want to misrepresent any talk of monetary policy and link them too closely to the idea of devaluation. But I think this is very important to make 2 points. If we had not taken the action that has been taken on debt, there's no doubt in my mind that devaluation would have happened. Could not have continued, that's a data point to add to a trend, could not have continued on that trend, that unnatural disaster trend, and be where we are today. We'd be in a completely different place, and we really would be forced to experiment with monetary policy. The way our economy is set up, you know, there's this thing in economics called the impossible trinity. You know, you have 3 factors to consider: interest rates, free movement of capital, and a fixed exchange rate regime. And you can only have 2 of those 3 at any given time. You can't have free movement of capital and a fixed exchange rate regime, for example. Now, we have very sound reasons for having a fixed exchange rate regime, and they relate generally to the cost side of our economy. We have to understand, when we plan our budgets, what our costs are going to be in the year. There are other reasons, but that is the headline one for me. Now, given that fact, and given the existence of this impossible trinity, it is very difficult to start saying, you know, let's play around with the exchange rate mechanism. I think we know. One of the things I tell my children, and in fact, I try and practice it in my professional life and private life also, is learn from the mistakes of others. You know, you don't want to carry out an experiment for intellectual curiosity when there's ample evidence of what will happen if you fiddle about with your own regime. We know that a fixed exchange regime as we have practiced it, which has been in existence since I think 1975, has instilled a level of confidence, notwithstanding the unnatural disaster. A level of confidence in the economy and in potential investors looking at us that otherwise would not be there.
Mr. President, this is the first time I'm having the pleasure of standing on a point of clarification, elucidation, and I just want to make it very, very clear, because I've raised this concept already and it was, for lack of a better word, thrown around recklessly. And I wouldn't want that to happen again, because I tried my best this morning to explain my intention for bringing up the options of monetary policy and what our options are in terms of managing our economy. Senator Adams, if my interpretation is right, is saying that we shouldn't experiment. I never said we should experiment. I said from an analytical perspective, in an intellectual exercise, meaning you purely do it from an academic standpoint, look at the options in relation to monetary policy to ensure that we're getting the best situation possible as it relates to our economic environment. I will stand here and say with a lot of conviction that I am in no way saying the Barbados dollar should be devalued. That is not my position. That is not the opposition's position, Mr. President. So I'm just trying to make that clarification for Senator Adams, because persons hearing him may feel that I've said we should experiment with a pegged exchange rate, which is definitely not what I would have sought to interject this morning in my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Drakes. I'm grateful for that intervention, because that is what I heard when you spoke, and I was not trying to hear that, you know. So I'm very pleased that you're not interested in tinkering with the exchange rate, and that is the position of the opposition, because it is 100% safe with us. I'll just move on to another point there, which was around the resuscitation. Well, I don't want to call it an argument. The means I believe, without wanting to risk another point of order, that you were saying further measures need to be taken to help resuscitate the economy, and you talked about trade policy in particular. I would just point out that there are a few things that will help revive the economy right now that are going on. What is going on with the pensioners and their bonds? $100 million is being put in their hands. $100 million injection, effectively, into the economy. There's the Greater Carlisle Bay Development Project going on. There are income tax refunds, VAT refunds, and various projects for foreign investment that will also, I think, come online. So things are being done, progress is being made, and I think it's tangible, the confidence that I see coming back into the economy. And I say tangible because in my work, I get to deal with potential foreign investors coming down here and talking about the climate, the changes they've seen over the year, and so on. It's a real thing. It's not just us standing up here imagining it. So I think we'd welcome any measure, concrete idea that can goose what we're doing even more. But I do think a great deal is being done. On that point, here's where I pick up with Senator Boyce. Those same bonds. So we're putting $100 million of cash into people's hands. He talked about creating a secondary market for those bonds. Now this is an important point, because an aged pensioner who put more than the $20,000 in cash he's going to get back into PLICO can't do that much sometimes with the bond itself if he cannot resell it. One thing that we really wish to do on this side, on the government side, is create a secondary market for those bonds, and it serves two purposes. One is to relieve the crisis created by, I won't say a natural disaster again so that Senator Franklin doesn't get to his feet, but the crisis that was created by a failed insurance company. And secondly, we have the opportunity by creating liquidity in these bonds that are going to be released, of promoting investment in them directly from the 10 billion in savings floating around the banking and credit union coffers. That, I mentioned upfront, was a point I'd offer in mitigation to what's going on in terms of the negotiation with overseas creditors. And I think it's a very important one. We know, you've heard me stand here before and say that growth can only come from three sources. One is capital investment. This fits that bill completely. If you can tap into that 10 billion, you can create another way to drive growth. And the other two are productivity and boosting employment, which I'm sure as a trade unionist you'll be happy to hear about. If we can find ways to boost the number of hours worked, we also promote growth. And with that, Mr. President, I think I will halt there. I lend my support to this bill, and I'm much obliged.
No, sorry. You.
Just no.
No. Senator Harris, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I shan't be long. I just want to make very few brief comments. First of all, I would obviously want to acknowledge that the government seemed to have been listening and have in fact arising out of this whole process have made some adjustments in terms of making cash available upfront to particularly the pensioners 60 years and over. And I would have been one who would have questioned and certainly suggested that this was going to be a most difficult situation for those pensioners. So it is interesting, and it is good to hear that government has somewhat alleviated the problem of the pensioners. It's a bit of a conundrum, though, Mr. President, because having gotten some cash up front, in fact, you could have received back a maximum of $50,000 by the end of March this year. And some people are saying, well, what do we do with this cash? Because now having gotten the cash back, there's that situation there, you're Dutch. And I raise that point to mention the fact that the investment climate right now in Barbados is really so poor. The stock exchange is the Barbados Securities Exchange is almost totally inactive, and it is on the decline because a number of the listed companies have actually been delisted. So we have that problem where we don't have the opportunities of being able to have access to those levels of investments. Obviously, it's going to take some time for confidence to return to people who may want to, if they were available, who would want to go back and invest in government securities. That is going to take a bit of time to give people that level of confidence once more that when government securities, such as we discussed in the previous in the resolution before us, we have $1.5 billion which of liabilities, a maximum liability under which government can raise treasury notes, etc. But the point is that having been, for want of a better word, stung within the last year by the government's procedure, it's really going to take a bit of time for that confidence to return, and for government to be able to confidently go out and issue treasury bills or treasury notes. I am also concerned, and in this case as well, Mr. President, and it was alluded to and it was raised by, I believe, Senator Drakes, what exactly is happening with the external portion of the debt. The clock, of course, is still ticking. Interest is accumulating on that debt. So the debt, in fact, up to this point, is really effectively increasing. We're not sure exactly what the status of the negotiations are, although we have had rumblings and we've seen certain disclosures in the press that the external debt holders will not be accepting an offer that has apparently been made to them, and that is very concerning, because until we can resolve the issue of the restructuring of the external debt holders, it's going to impact also on our ability, I think, to attract foreign investment. Obviously, investors will be looking and are looking to see what is happening in terms of these negotiations. And I rather suspect that that will also have an impact on our ability to get those investors who may be interested or who may be showing an interest in doing some of those investments to actually come on board until this whole restructuring, this external debt restructuring process is completed. So I think government has to perhaps take us in our confidence, let us know where they are in terms of the process, also send the message out to the potential investors so that we are all on board as to what exactly is happening. And we hope that by so doing, this will settle some of the doubt that currently exists, and that we may see a level of investments beginning to flow into the country. And that is important, because what we have not heard a lot so far to convince us, or certainly I have not heard a lot so far to convince me, that the government has concentrated or is concentrating in terms of its efforts of attracting investment for growth. And that is where we have, I think, to pay some special attention, because we have some strong commitments under the IMF program. I believe I've heard 6% figure spoken of of growth. But we're not seeing, or we're not hearing up to this point, any significant projects that will spur that level of growth. And I therefore think that I would like to hear a little more on how that external debt restructuring is going. Very good point was made by Senator Boyce, I think it was, in terms of trying to develop a market for those restructured domestic bonds. I definitely would like to be able to see that there could be some level of trading for those persons who are pretty advanced in age and who may like to have their cash available at a much shorter period than the extended 15 years, which is now the situation. And so I think it is a good point. And I think government needs to give it some thought and needs to facilitate, wherever possible, the legislation in order to be able to make that happen. But I am certainly pleased to see some movement, the movement that government has made in terms of the ease for the pensioners, and I trust that very shortly we will be able to hear some good reports from government as to the progress of the external debt restructuring. And with those few comments, Mr. President, I am indebted to you.
Senator Franklin.
I didn't intend to speak on this thing at all because I spoke on this debt thing when we first did it, but what I'm hearing now, making it look like the government is doing people a favor and they're being so nice. It reminds me of a fellow who shoots somebody and then call the ambulance and then claim that, oh, I saved his life. You know, don't shoot the fellow in the first place, you know. The unnatural disaster that Senator Adams talked about is this government. There was absolutely no need to go down this road by defaulting. We had the money to pay. Barbados could have paid and then sought to negotiate, but we put ourselves in a straitjacket where first thing we did was default and then think after. This is characteristic of this government. You do things and then you come back and undo them when you already did the wrong thing. It reminds me of something that Winston Churchill said about the United States. He said, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said and use Barbados. The Barbados, their party government. He says, I have every confidence that the Barbados, their party government, will do the right thing after they've tried everything else. That is what is happening here, sir. This is not even necessarily the right thing, but you've tried other things before. You should have done the right thing first. You know, because I remember when the restructuring first started, an old lady wrote to me, I still have the letter on my desk, because when she was expecting her money back under the old proposals, when she reached 111 years old. You know? So we know the government come back and give you some money, yes, they're doing the right thing now, but you do it because you're doing it in hindsight, in retrospect. You did the wrong thing first, and you waited until people start to quarrel, people start to complain. And I remember Senator Nurse beseeching the government to change what they were doing. You know, I'm not the only person that thumped my chest today, but Senator Nurse thumped his today too, because he's gotten his way. He's gotten the government to pull back. You know, he's gotten the government to pull back. So he can take a boat. You know, but what government has done is make Barbados very unattractive. Now, I wouldn't want to buy another government born in the next 40 years. I don't care what you do. Because I have no confidence that the government will not come back and do it again the next time. We had the people who had bonds, I said we, I had none, the people who had government paper. And they expected a certain payout. They had a contract, they had a valid contract with the government. The government came and changed the terms of that contract unilaterally. You know? Unilaterally. They didn't negotiate with the Barbados, you know. What they did, they put the people under duress and forced them into accepting the conditions that they put in place. And people talk about people sign off. But the people that had the most government, that was the government. National Insurance, Central Bank, and things. So when you hear that 80%, they say that, It's national insurance, which is controlled by the government. And a lot of people out there who had a few technical authority and put it in the and government paper because they didn't have anything to do with it right away. You then decided that their children, their grandchildren will get it because they're going to see it in this lifetime unless they live to 120. And not very many of us will do that. I still have my hopes, but this is what the government did. Yes, you come back and you partially fix it, but you should not have taken those steps first. Be rush and do things, and then come back and sort them out. Right? Look, as I said, I didn't want to speak on this thing because it bothered me a lot.
Is that not still your best instinct?
Pardon? But I heard this love fest, you know, people talking about the government doing the right thing. They haven't done the right thing. And then when you, right now we have two sets of people negotiating for government. I call them White Oak and Friends. Because White Oak is negotiating for government and the friends of the White Oak are on the other side of the table. The people who are negotiating for the government, White Oak, and the people on the other side of the table used to work with the same people at White Oaks. So you have no two buddies or four buddies sitting on either side of the table negotiating for us, and the only losers are going to be Barbados. And those people are going straight to the bank, laughing at Barbados, because they're negotiating among friends. The only non-friend in the room will be Barbados. You know, we are being joked. And I have a great difficulty with people now trying to make it look like though we have done something great. You did the wrong thing, and you are trying to fix it. You did the wrong thing by defaulting. You did the wrong thing by unilaterally changing people's conditions in their government paper. And then when you rest the crowd, look, just here the other day, this government, trying to save money, decided to cut people's invalidity benefits. Would you believe it took protests? One woman outside there embarrassed the government enough for them to announce that they weren't going to do it anymore. But they only announced, you know, because they have not given any instructions to the Treasury to fix it. So people are still suffering, but they just like to suffer in silence. We sit down and we hush and we go home and kick the cat because we can't kick anything else. You know? And we suffer because up to now these people have not gotten back their money, not the government the government cheating them out of. There was absolutely no reason for government to do what they did. But we do it. And now I'm hearing somebody, even before they get back the money, praising the government for giving us back our money. Don't take it in the first place. This is what's happening, you know. We got to stop this nonsense. Government has to think first and then act. We are acting, and when we finish, do the act, and then realize the harm that is going to cause, then we retreat. Name a situation since this government came into office where it did something that didn't have to revise. Starting with the telling people don't pay the road tax. Every instance, the government has to come back and change its mind or to undo the damage that it has done. I pray, I beg, I beseech this government, stop rushing to do things and then come back to fix it and then want credit for it. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you. Senator McConney.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to wind up this debate on the debt holder approval of debt restructuring bill, Amendment Bill 2019. Now, I first would not wish to accuse Senator Drakes of peddling devaluation economics. Would not want to do that at all today. But as we thought, she gave a philosophical conversation about debt and the history of debt strangulation, and she suggested that we would should look at other options. That certainly could lead many people including many in this chamber, to misunderstand that she was indeed peddling devaluation economics. But I really noticed that she pointed to some of the challenges in resolving external debt. And what I would say is that any time in a negotiation, even in one like this, one can settle debt. But a bad deal for Barbadians could mean higher taxes, and it could mean loss of more jobs. And the question is, are we to give better to others than we would give to Barbadians? All that we want is a fair deal for all. And so that is certainly what we are working towards. Now, there was a call also to resuscitate the economy using various different policies, and I think Senator Adams was very helpful in educating all of us about the ways in which different kinds of policies could, in fact, be beneficial. And in terms of resuscitating the economy, he highlighted a number of different ways. We heard Senator Boyce speak of developing a bond market for some of the restructured bonds. We have also been seeking to resuscitate the economy in all kinds of different ways. There's no one way. There are several different ways. Over 100 million in payments for CLECO, income and VAT rebates, for payments for arrears, net payments of income and various bond issues. We have done all of these plus more. We heard Senator Nurse talk about some of his colleagues, perhaps even he himself, being now flush with cash from the payments that this government has given to pensioners in 2018 and 2019. And I wish to thank Senator Boyce for acknowledging that this government does what it says it will do. And with regards to the pensioners, this is a listening government. We said that we would consider the situation as it was raised, and we did in fact follow through in doing what we would say we would do. Now, you're not a pensioner yet, Senator Tate. And that was the prepayment that was in fact done so far. Now, Senator Franklin said that we had the money to pay at the time we took over government and we did not have to default. And the truth is, and I believe that our Prime Minister, in number of different settings, would have outlined the fact that no, this government did not have the money that we needed at the time. At the time when we took over this government, we did not have enough money to pay our bills. And the former administration had at that time allowed the central bank to print money in order to pay the bills of this country. And even then, after that money was printed, we were still reneging on our bills at that particular time. And there are many different roads to address situations. This was the one that we took. We have not been afraid to make the difficult situations, make the difficult decisions. And as Senator Adams quite nicely said, and I saw that that Senator Franklin sought to turn the tables, but it did not succeed, sir. Because Senator Adams, he was speaking of the unnatural disaster that was the last administration that put this country in peril. And so, Minister, I will say, Mr. President, that this debt holder approval of debt restructuring bill and the resolution that attends it is government's effort to certainly do the right thing, and I'm not afraid to repeat that, because this government did not get us where we are now. It was the last administration that brought us here, and I do not want Barbadians or anyone else in this chamber to forget that we would not now have to be making these decisions. We would not now have to be bringing this kind of legislation. We would not now have to be taking these measures had the last administration done right by this country from a financial perspective. And so, Mr. President, with these few words, I wish to beg that this bill now be read again a second time.
The question is that the bill under consideration, the debt holder approval of debt restructuring amendment bill 2019, be read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move
Go ahead.
that your honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole for the further consideration of this bill and resolution.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and that the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill before us in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. We are now in committee. Over to you.
The Senate is in committee. Clause 1.
I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand apart. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Clause 2.
I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand apart. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Clause 3.
Mr. President, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand apart. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
I beg to move, Mr. President, that clause 4 stand part. Mr. Chairman?
The question is that clause 4 stand apart. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Mr. Chairman, that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. I've given you a promotion, sir.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you now do report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee. Thanks.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no, and we think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now pass and be cited as the Debt Holder Approval of Debt Restructuring Amendment Act 2019.
The question is that this bill do now pass and be so cited. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Order number 2, sir. In the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve the amount of $1.5 billion as the amount to be raised by the issue of Treasury bills, tax reserve certificates, and tax refund certificates in accordance with the Treasury Bills and Tax Certificates Act, Chapter 106.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the aforementioned resolution now pass.
The question is that the resolution under consideration do now pass. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Quick, so.
Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. President, as I introduce the two bills which you will recall early in this sitting, we ask that items 5 and 6 be treated as a cognate debate. I have to say, sir, that I wish to flag this chamber that the bill cited as the Utilities Amendment Bill should be cited as the Utilities Regulation Amendment Bill. And at the appropriate time in the sitting, we shall indeed make that simple amendment to the short title. The aforementioned bills before this House seek to amend the Utilities Regulations Act, Cap 282, to allow the minister responsible to exempt a utility service from any or all of the provisions of the Utilities Regulations Act where that exemption is required in the public interest. It also seeks to validate the adjustment in water rates and sewage rates levied and collected by the Barbados Water Authority from May 1st of this year. Mr. President, it is the Fair Trading Commission, the FTC, that administers the Utilities Regulation Act and therefore regulates the provision of electricity and water services by, among other things, setting rates. The proposed amendment will therefore permit the minister with responsibility for commerce to exempt the Barbados Water Authority from the provisions of the Act that requires the FTC to set rates. Why is that? What would otherwise be required under this Act, Mr. President, is that the FTC would hold rate hearings. And to get a rate hearing, the Barbados Water Authority would be required to have audited financial statements, up-to-date audited financial statements. The Barbados Water Authority, as many in this honorable chamber are aware, have not submitted such financial statements for many years which preceded this current administration. And even though this administration has worked to seek to bring some of these up to date, those financial statements are still quite far behind, and they may very well need to be some forensic work done to truly bring them to a state that is recognizable. Now, given this situation, Mr. President, the amendment would permit government to change the rates without the need for a full rate hearing. In this instance, the Barbados Water Authority is in no position to apply for a rate review, as it does not have the necessary audited financial statements and it does not have the resources to fund a rate hearing. The government increased commercial rates, and that increase took effect from May 1st, 2019. And it is validated by the Barbados Water Authority Validation of Water and Sewerage Rates Bill, which is also before us as part of this cognate at this time. Now, what government was seeking to do by raising these commercial rates is really to avoid a situation which we found ourselves in, where in fact some households were paying more for water than some commercial entities. You had, and I know that it would not have been in the intention, Mr. President, that a household would be paying more for water when in fact to a household that water is a human right. We need it to live, and would be paying more than a commercial entity for which that water would be an input to a process for a business. Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honourable she announced in the 2019 financial statement and budgetary proposals that effective May 2019, commercial rates for water would move from a fixed $4.66 Barbados dollars per cubic meter for water of all levels. And that 466 is about 233 US, given that there is a 2-to-1 exchange rate. The intention and what has been put in place is that for 0 to up to 40 cubic meters of usage of water, the rate would be $4.66 Barbados per cubic meter. For above 40 cubic meters up to 12,000 cubic meters would be $7.78 per cubic meter. And it was capped at that 1,200 cubic meters because usage above that would then go back to the $4.66. So it is up to 40, and then 40 it's capped off at $7.78. And then above 12,000 cubic meters, then it goes back to the 466. Mr. President, there are those who consider this hike to be something they would not wish to see. But I think we need to put this hike into context, because even with this, Barbados has one of the lowest rates or tariffs for water, certainly in this region and in the world. Let me just give you a few samplings. I'm going to give the US version, the US currency version, Mr. President, knowing that the Barbados at 466 is about 233 US dollars, then you can do the comparison at the 233 Barbados dollars. Dominica is 298 US dollars. Jamaica is about 288 US, both above Barbados. Bahamas is at about 550 US. The US Virgin Islands is about $6.18 US. The Cayman Islands about $4.48 US. Antigua is about $4.07. And I could go on, Mr. President. But the bottom line is that Barbados's rates, even with this most recent increase, would be below a significant number of our neighbors. Now, increased resources, Mr. President, are required to support, among other things, the upgrading of infrastructure for water. A massive part of Barbados's infrastructure is pipe mains for water. We have an aging infrastructure, Mr. President, and I am told that some estimates for replacing these mains are as startling as $1 million per kilometer. And we have about 2,500 kilometers of such mains. Now that includes procuring the pipe, that includes digging up the road, that includes laying the pipes, that includes fixing, putting back the roads, the entire process. Now, even if we were to consider these estimates, Mr. President, we would be looking at about $2.5 billion in total. And this may well be one of the largest capital projects undertaken in this country. The last government, and I give credit where credit is due, would have started water mains replacement. And I understand that they may have replaced something like about 1.5% of what there is to replace. This administration is continuing mains replacement, and we are seeking to access a funding facility that would allow us to add more kilometers of newer pipe mains. Now, this is a long-term effort that will take many years, Mr. President, to gradually replace all the mains that must be done. Understanding, Mr. President, that many of these mains are in excess of 100 years old. They date back, some of them, to 150 years when we were part of the British Empire. That is how long some of those mains have not been replaced. And therefore, the infrastructure work to be done, Mr. President, is significant. And so when we speak to this country about having all of us share the responsibility for building this country and creating the kind of future that we all want, it means we all will have to play our part. And so, Mr. President, it is with these few words that I open this matter for debate in this honorable House and beg that this bill, these two bills in cognate, be read a second time. This bill be read a second time. No, it's a cognate. Okay, yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have my speech on this piece of paper here, so it won't be too long. Mr. President, this is another example of what I spoke of earlier, where government rushing in and doing the wrong thing and then coming back to fix it. But I will start at the beginning. In 2008, 2007, 2008, when the last administration campaigning for office, they promised to put the Fair Trading, the Water Authority under the purview of the Fair Trading Commission. And to their credit, they did for a few weeks. They did. But when they wanted to raise water rates, the minister published an order to say that it's taken out from under the Fair Trading Commission and raised the water rates by 60%. There were so many things wrong with that. First, the minister had no authority to do so unless, in accordance with Section 37(3) of the Utilities Regulation Act, the minister could only remove a utility from under the purview of the Fair Trading Commission if there was a recommendation to him to do so, and that the utility, that there would have been effective competition in the market. There was no effective competition in the market for water. So the minister had no authority to do so under the Act, Section 37 of the Act, Section 37.3. But they did it, and they raised the water rates by 60%. And those water rates were done, and that 60% was done to upgrade the infrastructure that Senator McConnell spoke about. So I don't know, they got the money, they got 60% over 10 years that they shouldn't have gotten. And I don't know where that money went, because it went in the ground. Because according to Senator McConnell, how much, there's 1% of the pipes? 1.5% of the pipes. With a 60% increase in water rates, illegal water rates, mind you. The water rates were done illegally back then, because they had no authority outside the Fair Trading Commission. As Senator McConnell pointed out, you had to go before the Fair Trading Commission, and they didn't have any financial statements, the audited financial statements, so they couldn't have done it legally. So, if they're going to do it legally, they do it illegally. That's what they did. But this is now, but this government now sees the problem, and they don't want to do it illegally. So they rather than go and get some accountants working and solve the problem from that end, they want to come and give the minister some extraordinary powers. Because according to this piece of legislation that we are looking at, it says the minister may, on the recommendation of the commission or on his own initiative, exempt the utility service supplied by any service provider or part. Let me open this thing a little bit that I can read it. It says the minister may, on the recommendation of the commission or on his own initiative, exempt the utility service supplied by any service provider or part of that utility service from the application of all or any of the provisions of this Act, where the minister is satisfied that the exemption is required in the public interest. Now, what is the public interest here that this government is trying to do? Because somebody do the work and file financial statements and get the audit? That's a public interest? No. Go and do the financials, go and get the accounts done and get them audited. Hire some accountants.
I hope you're not in any doubt, though, that exercise for an institution that hadn't had audited accounts for years will take years.
Well, I don't know how long it will take, so I'm not an accountant.
I can tell you, I had that experience with another institution. It will take years.
I don't know how you do it, but the way is not to put this extraordinary power in the minister's hand. And if you want to do it now, sunset this piece of legislation. Give the minister that power for a couple of months. And then after that, let's go back to where it used to be. Because as it stands now, if you want to take a utility from under the Fair Trading Commission, that utility has to apply to the commission, and the commission would do whatever they do, have their hearings or whatever. And or the minister could use it if there is effective competition. Well, there's no effective competition in the supply of water because we only got one Barbados Water Authority, nobody else. So if I could agree to this in order to facilitate the government's program, I cannot give this power to the minister carte blanche. Because next thing you know, he will be exempting the lighting power, the telephone company and everybody else, because he will think it's in the public interest. Because I do not know where public interest is ever defined, you know. I don't see it. So if this is an emergency situation and you want to do this thing in an emergency, then treat it like an emergency. Give the minister the power to do so. As you're saying, it will take years to get these accounts finalized, and you want to stick your hand in the people's purse, raise the rate in the short term, then give the minister this power in the short term. Because I know the minister, the current minister that we have now, and I know that he will not do the wrong thing. But he will not always be minister. He will not always be minister. Next election, he gone. And then somebody else might come and do the wrong thing. So my thing is, and we won't do the wrong thing either. But you see, you don't know who will come in and who. So do not put temptation in the fella's way. You know, that's what I'm saying. Don't tempt a fella. No, I remember one day, you know, a fella borrowed some money from me, and he bought it. And I tell him, well, when he passed, give it to my mother. And my mother, when he got there, my mother open the envelope. He said, "You don't trust me?" I said, "No." He said, "You take it." He said, "She said, no. I don't think he would do the wrong thing, but I just not giving opportunity." Right? And this is the same situation here. I do not think that this current minister will do the wrong thing, and I don't know that any minister will do the wrong thing, but I don't want to put the temptation in his way. This is a power that the minister does not need to have. And if you say this is an emergency and you want to stick your hand in the bucket talking about water rates, is the highest in the thing, but your gas rates is the highest too. So we got to balance out. You can't have the highest of everything. You know what I mean? Our gas rates is probably the highest in the world now, because it used to be the third highest. And now we think we creep up again because we just carried them up. So it might be the highest in the world. So if we got the highest gas rates, you want the highest water rates, look at there. Yeah, you be going to get a break somebody and kill us. That is my thing. But I want to talk a bit about the water authority, because the water authority is in the news. And we have a lot of complaints. You heard in the program, the radio program, you hear people talking about the pipes running, and you call the water authority and the boy coming to fix them. But let me declare an interest here now, because my own sister, and I'm not saying a big sister because I don't want to give her any, put her anything, because I had 8 sisters. So you wouldn't know which one it is. 6 brothers too. But one of my sisters, when the last government went into this crooked deal, to change the meters, they formed this company and to put on these smart meters, they call them smart meters. Those meters are not smart. First of all, not many of them work. And the only time the Barbados Water Authority acknowledges that the meters are not working is when they work backwards. Because one month you would have a meter saying you have 100, you're taking short 100. So they charge you for the 100 thing, you know? So the next month when you come back and read, it's saying 42. So then they would know that it couldn't have been 42, so then they would decide, oh, that meter ain't working. But if it's showing 100 this month, and then it's showing 400 the next month, they charge you for it. It's ain't working. Like, you just use a lot of water. There is nobody in Barbados that can fix those meters. Nobody knows how. Those meters were dumped on us. I don't know who dumped them. I just know that a company was formed to change some good meters that we had. And they want you and change them to these smart meters, these digital dumb meters that don't work, and that the Barbados standards, national standards institution, and they should take some lashes for this, they are supposed to regulate measuring instruments in Barbados. They are supposed to determine if they're actually saying what they're supposed to say. But they didn't test these meters. They didn't know how. They took it on a certificate from somebody in Germany that said these meters work good. And they took that, and as a result, they allowed those dumb meters into Barbados, and you, sir, you, ma'am, and everybody else in here paying for more water than they've used. But my sister was a different case. You know, this special company that they formed, at the first time they ever changed a meter or to do anything with plumbing was when they start this contract. They weren't plumbers before. They started, you know, they were expert plumbers. The first thing they ever did was plumbing, and they started in the plumbing contract. And they hired whoever they could to put on this. They showed up to get them a crash course and tell them, oh, you can change meters now. So when they put on my sister's meter, my sister noticed when they left that the meter was leaking from both ends. From the side where she would the measure from her, it was leaking over there, and it was leaking on the other side before it goes through the meter. She called the water authorities every day for over a month. Nobody came. So much so that people slid down in the moss eventually that grew there after a while. Nobody came to fix that. But you know what happened? They sent my sister a bill for $15,000. $15,000. Like 15,000. 15 with 3 zeros at the end. Of course, she didn't pay. And then the water, when they realized their error, they tell her, pay $700. But she said, I never paid $700 before. So this inflated. So she came to her little brother, because she was the sister who used to bathe me, I think when I was a little boy, my big sister. And so she came to her little brother and asked me to look into it for her. I wrote the Barbados Water Authority. And those people don't want to deal with me. So they wrote an acknowledged receipt and then start talking with her. And reduced the amount of money by a small amount again. Still not enough, because according to the legislation, if your meter ain't working, the Barbados Water Authority is to assess you on a 3-month average. See how much you use over the last 3 months and give you an average. So the $700 that she had, she never had $700 before, she never had $200 before. But they give somebody coming up there who has probably never read the legislation to deal with water authority, you know, and came up with this arbitrary thing and tell you pay $700. Still too much. And it would not have been so much if the water authority had gone and fixed, well, first of all, if those crooks, those plumbers, didn't put on the meter badly. So it started back in 2008. So even though they were charging you a lot of money for water that you didn't use, 60% more than they had the legal right to do, and then nobody knows about that 60% gone. And now this government now, on top of that 60%, because what the government should be doing now is reducing the water rate by 60%, because you are standing on top of an illegality. Something that was done incorrectly and illegally, you don't validate it, because that water rate was done contrary to law. Because the Fair Trading Commission, as they said, didn't do it, and the minister didn't have the power. But then what they did after they took the water company, the Barbados Water Authority, from under the purview of the Fair Trading Commission, kept the water rates, then they put it back. You know, these people have been locking it ever since. Not just now. This is right early in their term. So they should have been locked up ever since. Shouldn't have got a second term, but people in Barbados like punishment, and they gave them a second term. I have a great difficulty, sir, now, with the water authority as it stands right now. You have people up there that don't want to go to work. Not because they're lazy or because they want to get government money for nothing. Because the government has imposed upon them a tell the hand. Who want to kill everybody. A person who goes into court telling people, call them cockroaches. Yeah. Abusing the staff. Threatening the staff. I'm talking about the chairman. People get pressure going up as a result. First of all, no chairman of no statutory corporation anywhere in Barbados has the right going to any staff and cursing them and telling them anything, you know. And to my certain knowledge, the minister knows about it, and he ain't doing anything to take the pressure off of these people that are working up there, you know. You cannot have a chairman walking in the place, abusing staff, being abusive to staff, insulting them. First of all, that in my field, that's called constructive dismissal. Let them walk out and get them before the Employment Rights Tribunal. But that tribunal might take too long. But the minister got power to move this burden now. Only last week, this is this week, man, because I started today Wednesday. Only this week, members of staff from the Water Authority came to my office with recordings of the abuse. That they have been subjected to. Pick up the phone and call people home and curse them at home. I don't know where people think they got the power to do that or got the right to do that. And the thing has got big men trembling. And my time when I was more militant, I would abuse her back. But a lot of people are frightened because they claim that she has the minister behind her, they got the prime minister behind her, they got everybody behind her thing. The prime minister or the minister or anybody else doesn't have the power to give somebody, that kind of power to give to anybody. The Water Authority had problems because we know when it started, when this government came into office, we had sewage flowing in the streets freely. But the way to fix that problem is not to curse people and threaten them and telling them, I get rid of your boss, they're gonna get rid of you too. No worker in Barbados should be subjected to that kind of foolishness. We see it in the private sector a lot. I know those statutory corporations are learning it. Sir, it has to stop. Because I promise you, I don't have a lot of members at the Water Authority, just a handful. But that handful is in a strategic area. You know, I am not like the minister responsible for the prisons who said they've got us just a handful. He got real big hands, you know. I have just a handful, a few. But those few can make an impact. I don't want to advise them to take that action. So, no, I'm not threatening. I promise. So I am asking the minister responsible for the Water Authority, and if he does not possess the gonads to do it, the Prime Minister do it. But somebody has to stop this abusive behavior post-haste. Not next week, not tomorrow, no. Because I have the forms on my desk. I haven't even processed them yet. But if we have to, I will protect those workers from this abuse. I don't care where it's coming from. I don't care who she's related to. I don't care who she's married to. I don't care anything. Workers must not, but no, the people believe so. People believe so. I know he's a decent man, but people believe so. Right? And I don't care how much campaign she finances either. She has to behave herself. As a matter of fact, I don't think behaving is good enough. No, she should go. Her behavior is such that she should not set foot at the Water Authority again unless she got to pay a bill. Because how are those people going to work with her? I've seen an email from the permanent secretary complaining that he will put down the phone and that he saw again. So I think only the lower level staff at the Water Authority, the engineers or whoever, it is even the permanent secretary. She has no respect for anybody. Mr. President, I need it done, and I need it done urgently. If it is not done, I promise you, the Water Authority when the water don't run, it won't be because they ain't got enough water in the reservoir. And that is the case a lot. You know, we got some reservoirs that dry. But this time it wouldn't be because of that. It wouldn't be because of the drought, it'd be some reason. And I finished with that. Now I'm going to talk about the drought and the water in certain areas. Again, another one of my sisters that I had it. She is paying this water and sewage tax that the government implemented, and all of last month, not a drop of water, the size of a golf ball, came through her pipe. But she had to go and pay for this levy, this sewage levy. Mind you, I said when we debated it that there are some people who don't even have a toilet and paying it, but no, she didn't even get a drop of water and paying it. And she's not the, excuse me, I am not here defending my sisters today, but I am speaking about what's happening to people, and I'm using them as examples. Because her neighbors in her area didn't get any either.
Still not the system.
Yeah, they're still sending them bills. I'm still charging them this $45, you know, the $150 a day. Yeah, I call the fella, brah, and said to him, I can't get on the system, I want to get on the system. So he's a friend of mine, so I want some help. You know what he tell me? He ain't paid yet. He ain't got no water, but he got to hold on. He got to go and get some water, he got to go and bail at somebody else. He live in the same area as my sister. He's paying for that water. So the government is, you see, taxing you for a service that you ain't getting. You know? I know I bought this budget here, this provisional collection of taxes for a reason. I packed it up with me this morning when I was preparing for this debate. Because I didn't know which one we were going to bring, so I bring everything. I had this bag for everything funny. It says, taxes include all assessment, charges, duties, fees, rates, impositions, and other levies, however called, the proceeds of which are payable into the consolidated fund as part of the revenues of Barbados. The Prime Minister announced in the budget an increase in water rates. And that increase was effective from May. Then that money should have gone to the Treasury. Because unless, under this act, that allows the Prime Minister or the Minister of Finance to raise taxes without legislation, without coming to Parliament, that money can only go into the consolidated fund. So that means you cannot raise water rates or bus fares or anything of that nature in a budget. So when you come, big look, this piece of legislation should be used after the estimates. When government says, well, look, we expect to collect so much and so much, but we got to spend so much. And you know, what we are spending is more than we expect to collect. So you want to get money in an emergency, you want to get some money fast. So this is the legislation that allow the Minister of Finance to raise taxes immediately. Remember when I was a little boy, you used to hear the then Prime Minister and the Right Action and everybody say from midnight to night. That used to be the call. Because you can raise the tax there and then without passing legislation. It was a tax and it had to go into the consolidated fund according to this legislation. It can't go into the coffers of minibus men, it can't go into the coffers of the Transport Board, and it can't go into the coffers of the Barbados Water Authority. So government had no authority whatsoever to raise water rates in a budget. But people get excited and rush and raise everything. You know, you get excited and you talk for 6 hours and do the wrong thing. You did the wrong thing and now you're coming trying to fix it. But we got to stop doing the wrong thing. Learn your craft. Study your craft. If you're a politician, you're an MP, what you need to do is to learn what you're supposed to do and then go and do it. My brother here is a lawyer. I understand he's a good defense lawyer. Senator Sands. But he didn't start out so. He went and learned his craft. He didn't just get good one time. He went to school and studied. Now, if you become an MP and you don't learn your craft yet, start reading up. Because the government is doing the wrong thing too often. You have not, look, get elected. Oh, everybody get elected. Any fool can get elected. But every fool can run the government. But you got to learn what to do. And they're doing it wrong all the time. You know, a fellow is liable to make a mistake here and a mistake there, but you make a mistake after mistake after mistake. Everything that the government is doing is a mistake, and then they're going to seek to undo it. Raise the water rates? Mistake. Take away people money from them in taxes? Mistake. Take away the old people invalidity benefits? Mistake. Employ white oats? Mistake. Everything you do is a mistake that you have to undo. No, but I had again. And finally, so I want to save this one for the last. The Barbados Water Authority is authorized in law to charge you water rates at a monthly rate. Monthly. I have a bill in my hand where their month has 52 days. But don't be surprised because this government, I don't know how to count, you know, because this year alone, we have a 7th month year for tax purposes, remember? Because we paid taxes last year in November, and then the next year, we got paid by June. So there's a 7th month year. This is the first 7th month year we had, probably it's coming every 60 years because the first time in 6 years I've seen one. So the Water Authority do the other way. They have months that last 52 days. And I can tell you why this is dangerous for the pockets of people. Remember, we have this tiered system with water rates. You pay $2.48 for your basic needs. Then you charge $3.10 for the normal needs. And then the discretionary rate, you pay $4.66. And the excessive use, you pay $7.78. But when a person uses water and you don't check the meter in a month's time, you check it in 52 days or 60 days as they're doing. Then that month has, you use water, now it looks as though you use water for a whole set of water. When you use so much, you probably use your normal needs in the first 30 days. But the body your body check you in 30 days, so that add on the next 30 days onto that, and have you as though you have used a whole set of water and charge you the excessive use rate, which is unfair. They can only charge for 30 days. But they're charging 52 days and robbing people. And they don't only do it to my sister, because this is what my sisters do. That's where I get the bill from. They're doing it to a lot of people. And then when you don't pay the rate, they turn off your water. They're robbing you. They're stealing from customers, and people don't realize that they're being stolen, people are stealing from them. They don't realize it. People don't know. They don't understand because they don't understand. The Water Authority can only charge you for 30 days. If they don't do that, for some reason the meter reader fellow didn't come around, or the meter isn't working properly, or something, when they check your meter and there's a problem, they are supposed to go back and check the last 3 months to see what rate you were using and charge you the average. They don't add on the water for 90 days and all kind of stuff and charge you as though you operating some manufacturing thing. It is wrong. It is dishonest. People know better. You can't tell me that people in the Water Authority don't know this. Why you know everything? I just read it the idea. So they were dealing with the Water Authority after all these years. They should know it too. So if they turn off people's water when it is their fault, I can recommend the people to sue. Because they just take too much, you know. We take it and we grumble. We go home and kick the cat, you curse the wife or something, and go work and get in trouble because you got so much stress, so much pressure on you that you take it out at the wrong place at the wrong time. And one of the things that you should not be taking out on people is the water rates. When you say, you tell the wife, how many use so much water, but here got a leak. You know how many people went and get a plumber and dig up the yard to look for leaks that they didn't have because they didn't realize that the bill had 90 days, a 90-day month. This nonsense has to stop. Government is about protecting the most vulnerable in society. And this government and its statutory boards ain't doing that, sir. They are taking advantage of the people. They're hurting them. And the people who need to be protected are not being protected. I want to talk about something else, but I will save that for the next bill coming up. I understand we're going to be dealing with the VAT thing sometime coming up soon. And I want to deal with that to show you how government is not taking care of our people, but I will leave that for another time. Mr. President, I hope that my words today have found the right ear and a listening ear and an ear that is willing to let the owner of that ear take action. One, on the abuse at the Pure Water Authority. Two, on the people who overcharge customers. And also, three, the government has to be serious, about its business. We cannot continue this hodgepodge method of governance. You're doing it wrong and then bouncing back and on doing it, and then expect praise for it. I had a note here, and I'm not going to read it. I am going to just advise the government because it would be fair, but I don't want to aggravate them too much. I just want to do the right thing. So I'll temper it by saying this government has located itself, outside the bounds of decency, and it ain't trying to get back in the border. It ain't trying to step back over. It's doing these things and realizing that Belgians take it, but Belgians can stop taking it. There's no look at the Chinese people in Hong Kong. For years, since the Chinese took back over in 1998, people out there were living in fear of what the Chinese might do. But only last week, 2 million of the 7 million people in China took to the streets. In Hong Kong. 2 million of a 7 million population. You know how many people that is? And for the scared Chinese to do it, people that thought were scared. Our people got to start getting some guts and stand up to the abuse that they're taking from employers, from government, from the Water Authority, from everybody. Our people has to get little guts. Mr. Chairman, I'm obliged. Mr. President, sir, I'm sorry. I'm obliged to you.
I next recognize Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. know, when we come in here and we speak, I've learned over time there are certain things we can expect from each senator. You know, so Senator Franklin, who's just sat down, he will normally treat us to some unexpected page of his multi-page CV. We'll learn about some job that, you know, and he'll probably have allegations of graft thrown in there also. Senator Drake's, to her credit, will make sure that we're mindful of economics and environment and the sustainability thereof. It's always a joy. I see Senator Tate over there. She's one who would take us to task for a comma that is missing, or poor drafting, or the amount of notice she personally has received for the order paper and what's going to be discussed. I wish Senator Rogers was here because now this is a trend. I think he has said it 3 times. When he's made some contribution that addresses the need for a moral approach to governance, he manages to get a reference in there to people like Buju Banton, which is surprising but impressive. And also not in his seat, but I'll say it anyway, Senator Boyce, he's one who delivers a measured approach. You know, he will say, yes, I fully support the government, but have they given full thought to the amount of resources that this might imply? So all in all, I start off this way to say that it's a diverse body of opinion that contributes to oversight, valuable oversight. And for my part, what I wanted to talk about was maybe slightly higher level rather than the detail, useful as it is, that each senator may go into or present their point of views. What we're talking about with these bills is how to build a world-class infrastructure for water and sanitation services. These bills are really talking about conservation and security. And what they recognize that I like is that water is a common good. It's not a public good. And this is important when it comes to discussing the financing underlying how you're going to build this world-class water infrastructure. Common good means that water is exhaustible and it has to be managed accordingly. Now, Barbados happens to be a water scarce country. It's nearly always on the top 20 list of countries for water scarcity in the world, and that's from the Food and Agricultural Organization. And it's actually getting worse. One of the metrics that is used to measure this is called total renewable water resources. And at the time of independence, Barbados per capita had about 338 cubic meters per person. And today that number is around 280. Every year it declines. And one of the reasons it declines is because we don't have surface water or rivers. We have an aquifer system, and it's tapped by around 20 wells. Now you may know, or you may not remember, but last year those wells are tested. And last year, 3 of them proved to be brackish. That is to say, they were being over-demanded, if you like. And 2 of them were given some rest so they could replenish. So we're water scarce. We're tapping the aquifers that we do have in a way that's not sustainable. And it's recognized that we're water scarce and it's getting worse. How do other countries in the Caribbean compare to us? You know, places like St. Kitts, you'd think they'd be in the same predicament, but they're not. They actually have a higher total renewable water resource per capita than we do. I mean, I do have the numbers, 434 cubic meters. Antigua and Barbuda is 510. And in fact, Barbados is the poorest country in the Caribbean when it comes to the amount of total renewable water resources at its disposal. Now, I say all of this to lead up to the point that if we do nothing on the supply side of our problem and the demand side of our problem, it will get worse. I heard it said earlier today, water is life. Water is life. Water is key to our development, our socioeconomic development. And we've heard Senator Franklin talk about some of the day-to-day issues that people face where they're paying and they're not getting the water. The agent charged with fixing this is the Barbados Water Authority, but they don't have the money to do it. Now, some of you may have gone through the Auditor General's report that came through, I think, a couple of weeks ago. And there are a couple of references in that to the BWA. One of them, this was a 2018 report, so it's talking about what happened in 2018 report. And it noted, the Auditor General noted that the Treasury had advanced $54.9 million, I think, to the BWA. And he noted dryly that it was not in a position to repay this money. It's not in a position to repay the money. It's not in a position to make the investments necessary to fix the water crisis that's before us. And it is a crisis. When I prepared for this debate, I was actually surprised by what I found. I did not realize that the problem was as acute as it was. You know, that we test these aquifers, we test these wells tapping the aquifers, and some of them are no longer suitable for use. We have to give them a rest. Now, the more you dig into this problem, the harder the solution appears to be. It's like a lot of what we have in the country at the moment. We haven't made sufficient investment in the past to cope with what the problems right in front of us. Now, in the other place, some of the members during their debate made the point that actually water pricing here is very, very reasonable. It compares favorably to other parts of the Caribbean. And that's a pretty good argument. I would go further and say water is so key that even if the rates were not favorable, we need to pay them in order to fix this problem. That's how dire the situation is. Now, on the question of affordability, pricing, it's striking to me that we talk about water. Sometimes it's considered a public good rather than a common good, and it's certainly a common good, and the right to access to water. Now, in 2010, the UN General Assembly declared that the right to access water and sanitation services was a human right, but it went out of its way to say that is a human right that doesn't come for free, that it's not free, it has to be affordable. And they put a number on what we should pay or what we should not pay. And in fact, this is the UNDP subsequent to this. And they said, in order to guarantee access to the provision of water and sanitation services, people should not be forced to pay more than 5% of average household income. That's water and sanitation services. Now, of course, you read that and you want to know where we stand in relation to the 5%. Well, this was an average household number. It's hard to get that in Barbados, or at least I couldn't find it. What I did find is the average per capita income in Barbados, which is around $16,500 US annually, per person, not per household. That is regular, physical cash money. And we may make light and make jokes, but truly, when you look at the data behind this is a critical situation, and it demands urgency. You know, when we say things like, and I'm going to digress very slightly, as you did, Senator Franklin, that rather than approve this kind of provision, just make them go and do their audits. Well, the Auditor General noted that they're missing 3 years of audits, 2015 to 2018. And it takes time to prepare these audits. And depending on the integrity of the records, it takes even more time to do it. I would suggest to you that the urgency is such that this kind of bill that makes provision for financing the solution is really necessary and timely. But to go back to the affordability, at least on the domestic bill side, $16,500 US, 5% of that a month in Barbados dollars is about $137. Now, I do not have the data for the average water bill and provision of sanitation services in Barbados, but anecdotally, it is less than that. Now, we may not like the price. It's not outrageous if you go on the UN's record, and we need to have the money to finance the upgrades. Now, of course, this bill is really talking about commercial customers rather than domestic customers. Commercial customers will pay significantly more money, but it's important to note the context here. We're talking about a situation where the corporate tax, the top tax rate, has gone down from 25% to a maximum of 5.5% and a minimum of 1%. Now, in that context, if you have a rise in the price of one of your inputs, I would suggest that it's manageable. I just want to spend a few moments talking about where the BWA would actually spend this money. Now, we may all have seen some of these stories in the press. One that struck me was that the BWA estimates about half of its supply is unaccounted for. You know, it goes through the pipes and it doesn't show up at the other end. Now, there are many reasons this can be the case, but one of the places that money has to be spent is on early leak detection and pipe rehabilitation. This is key. We heard Senator McConnell talk about the state of the infrastructure, the age of the infrastructure, and the degradation to it. It's absolutely key that we start a rolling program of repairs to fix that. And this is not a, we may all be under the ground by the time that we make good on this, but if we don't start, it won't get fixed. One of the other areas Senator Franklin touched on, and this is people drawing water and they're not registered to pay the water. I think you would call it illegal connections. I think it's a combination of connections that are perhaps illegal. It could be administrative reconciliation that has to go on where the system is simply not billing properly. It could be related to the meters. I don't know, but there is a lot of unmetered activity where people are drawing water that has to be rectified. I'll speak to in a second to another point about what happens when you give away something for free. It's just not value. It is not, what is the word? It's not used judiciously. And that is the case when you have someone is granted one way or another access to water that's unmetered. The second place where the BWA has said openly it has to spend money is in encouraging people to use low flow water devices. That might be low flow lavatories, shower heads, taps, and so on. I'd suggest the government on this side could think seriously about embedding that in legislation so that with new constructions, these devices are automatically installed, and maybe even giving thought to incentives to retrofit. And there's an example of that I'll finish up with when I conclude. Perhaps the most thorny problem in my mind to rectify is the network of standpipes we have around this island. 600 standpipes, unmetered. The BWA did a test of these and looked at the flow going through them. And they wouldn't say how much water was going through some of these standpipes. They just said they were aghast. That's their word. They were aghast at the quantity of water going through these things. We have to find a balance between provision to communities of water, access to water and sanitation services, and the cost. This is an exhaustible supply. I mean, this is why I introduced it the way I did. It's not going to come back easily if we don't fix the system and if we don't educate people on the demand side. BWA has to find a way to deal with that network such that the next time they look at the water flows through it, they don't use the word aghast at the quantity going through. Now this speaks, I think, to a broader program that would be useful, and I think the BWA is going to do some of it, but it's a wider government initiative that needs to take place, and this is education and sensitization. I actually did not know before preparing for this debate, as I said earlier, just the underlying supply structure of our water, that is the geographic situation, and the amount of waste on the demand side that has to be dealt with pipe rehabilitation, for example, and leak detection. Those two, the supply and the demand, they have to be set in balance, because right now they're out of balance, where demand is far heavier than supply. This bill, I think, would set the financial foundation in place to start attacking the work. It's not an overnight job, for sure. Here's the example I mentioned earlier about what we could expect 20, maybe even 30 years hence if we get this right. In the early 80s, Boston, Massachusetts, was not in a dissimilar position to us. They had a situation where demand was outstripping supply, and their initial suggestion was to pipe in water, a very ambitious capital works project, from miles away. But the taxpayers refused that because it was simply too expensive. And they essentially undertook a program that used those 4 points I outlined earlier to attack both demand and supply. They had an ambitious project to repair leaking pipes, to upgrade them, to detect leaks very, very quickly, and also to find them and repair them very, very quickly. It's one thing to know there's a leak, it's another thing to actually repair it. And they also did these things where they encouraged people to retrofit low flow water devices and so forth. Now, in the 30 years since they did that, water usage in Boston, despite increased economic activity, despite a larger population, water consumption has declined by 50%, 50%. And in fact, today, Boston uses less water than it did in the early 1900s. That's how successful this program has been. No, this is not about telling people don't bathe. That's about the third time you've mentioned that. There's a fixation. This is about sensible demand side management and understanding the supply side situation. This bill goes a long way to fixing that, and I fully support it, and I recommend my colleagues do as well. I'm obliged to.
President, I beg to move that we suspend the sitting for about 15 minutes and return at approximately 5:15.